All right, let's dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, this book by Robert Kiyosaki. It's a book that's definitely gotten people talking
Mm.
with, its unique take on, like, money and how to build wealth.
Yeah, yeah, you're right about that. It's not your like typical how-to finance book, It's um more about your mindset, like what you need to actually become successful.
It almost feels like a personal development book, disguised as a finance book.
Yeah,
Good.
exactly. And like to get his points across, Kiyosaki tells the story of his own life, growing up with two father figures, his actual poor dad and then his best friend's rich dad, right?
And using these two dads, he shows how different perspectives on money, like, can really lead to very different results in life.
Exactly.
So we have this poor dad who represents that, like, traditional path that most of us, are taught to follow. Good grades, get a secure job,
Yeah.
work hard, retire comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have rich dad who kind of throws all that out the window.
He turns everything on its head. Basically, like, Rich Dad really believed in understanding how money works, being financial is the word, like financially literate so you can use that knowledge and make money work for you.
Hmm.
He was never really about, job security. It was all about building assets, stuff that could actually generate income.
Which is the opposite of what most of us are taught growing up, right?
Mm.
Like, get a stable job, get that steady paycheck. And it's almost like this book is trying to deprogram us from that.
Yeah.
And this is what I find so interesting about this book. It really challenges, those deep-seated beliefs we have about money, about
Yeah.
success. And, there's this one story, I don't know if you remember, where a 9-year-old Kiyosaki, he gets tricked into working for Rich Dad for, like,
Oh.
pennies, right?
Oh yeah, that's one of the most memorable parts. It really stuck with me. And like it wasn't about Rich Dad, trying to be exploitative or anything. I think he was trying to give Kiyosaki a taste of what it's actually like to, be trapped in that cycle of just working for money.
Right.
He wanted Kiyosaki to like crave something different, something better.
And to break free, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm seeing how this whole, like, two dads thing kind of sets the stage for everything else in the book, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
not just about, specific, like, financial tricks or strategies. It's more about, like you said, questioning those assumptions we've all inherited about, what it actually means to be successful, financially successful.
Exactly. And that leads us to like one of the most powerful concepts in the book. It's this distinction between act he really makes it so simple. He's just like, look, assets are things that put money in your pocket and liabilities are things that take money out.
Which seems really basic when you put it that way. But when you start thinking about it, it totally, like, flips the script on how we think about, like,
Hmm.
everyday things. Like, even owning a house. Most people consider their house to be, like, their biggest asset.
Right?
But Kiyosaki says no. For most people, it's actually a liability.
Yeah, and he's not saying that like homeownership is inherently bad or anything. He's just challenging that conventional wisdom that we've all like accepted. Think about it this way. You've got mortgage payments, property taxes, repairs, renovations. Like, is all that putting money in your pocket?
Yeah.
Or is it taking money out?
No, it's definitely taking money out. You're constantly pouring money into it, unless you're renting it out. Like,
Yeah.
your house isn't generating income,
Well,
for most people at least.
exactly. And Rich Dad, he always emphasized, building a whole column of assets like stocks, bonds, rental properties if you can swing it, businesses, like things that can generate income even while you're like asleep?
Passive income.
Yeah, passive income. That's the real key to building long-term wealth.
So for someone who's just starting out, like, just dipping their toes into all of this,
Yeah.
how do you even begin to shift your thinking and actually, like, start building that asset column? I know Kiyosaki talks a lot about this idea of, like, minding your own business,
Yeah.
which
Right.
almost sounds like, a recipe for getting fired, right? Like,
Mhm.
don't mind your own business, mind your boss's business.
Right. Yeah. It's not about like quitting your job tomorrow and, dropping everything. It's more about changing your focus, I think. Like instead of just focusing on, working for that paycheck, it's about um, acquiring assets, building those assets. Think of it like, Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's. Everyone thinks of him like as a fast food mogul, right? Burgers, fries, the whole thing. But really, what he was building was a real estate empire.
Wait, what? Really?
Yeah.
Explain that.
So, like, the real value of a McDonald's franchise, it wasn't really the burgers and fries. It was the land that, the restaurant was sitting on. Kroc understood that real estate is a tangible asset, something that's like going to appreciate in value over time.
So he was playing A much bigger game than just, flipping burgers.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how there's like different levels to this whole minding your own business thing. It
Right.
could be starting a side hustle, could be investing in the stock market, could be actually buying a rental property, like you said.
Yeah.
It's anything. They can put you more in control of like your financial future.
Yeah, exactly.
And this reminds me of another one of Kiyosaki's big ideas, right?
Yeah.
The whole concept of like financial intelligence.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people might hear that and think, oh, this is about being good at math. But it's not really about math, is it?
No, no, it's not about crunching numbers all day. It's more about seeing like opportunities. Opportunities that other people might, just miss.
Like the story of Alexander Graham Bell,
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
when he tried to like sell the patent for the telephone to Western Union and they just laughed him out of the room.
Right. Yeah.
They couldn't even like grasp the potential of the telephone, but he had that vision.
They just didn't see it.
It's like a textbook example of like lacking that financial intelligence.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, like how many opportunities are we all blind to because we just lack that vision?
Absolutely. And financial intelligence, I think it's about like connecting the dots, understanding how all these like different trends, technologies, things like that, how they'll shape the future. And then, it's about positioning yourself to like actually capitalize on those changes.
So it's not about just following the crowd. It's about trying to get ahead of the curve.
Yeah, exactly.
Got Bill Gates with Microsoft.
Yeah.
I mean, he saw the future of personal computers before like anyone else did. And that foresight made him one of the, wealthiest people in history.
Yeah.
But of course, there's a catch, right? I mean, Kiyosaki also talks about all those roadblocks that prevent most people from, achieving financial success.
Right.
Like fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, arrogance, all that.
Yeah.
And I think, of all those things, fear is the one that probably everyone struggles with the most,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to money. We're afraid of making the wrong investment, losing our savings, ending up in debt, all that.
Right.
And I think that fear comes from a lack of, that financial literacy we were talking about. Like when you don't really understand how money works, every investment just feels like a gamble.
Yeah, totally.
So how do you get past that fear? I remember Rich Dad had that great line, remember the Alamo.
Oh, yeah. And it sounds kind of counterintuitive, right?
Right.
But he wasn't actually advocating for being reckless or anything. What he meant was that you have to be okay with the possibility of failure. Because, the people who actually succeed are the ones who are willing to like learn from their mistakes and just keep moving forward.
So it's about like reframing your perspective on failure.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not the end of the world. It's a learning experience. Just like those, brave Texans at the Alamo.
Yeah.
They use their, well, I guess you could call it a defeat as like a rallying cry for, victories in the future.
Exactly.
But, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's not just all like theory and mindset, right? It's full of really practical advice too. I mean, we've only just scratched the surface here, but I'm curious, like what's one concept that's really resonating with you so far?
Well, for me, I think what's really stuck with me is this idea that like financial intelligence, it's not some, innate talent that you're just born with. It's something that you can actually learn and develop. It's about being curious. It's about, asking questions and being willing to like challenge your own assumptions.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this book so empowering, I think. It gives you the tools to like start thinking differently about your finances, your career, your future, the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's a whole other layer to like Kiyosaki's advice that we haven't even gotten to yet. Like he actually gives practical steps that you can take to start, building that financial intelligence and, start building wealth.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What are some of those like actionable steps that people can take? Let's dive into that next. Okay, so we've been talking about mindset, about, financial intelligence, but what does that actually look like, in real life? What can people actually do to start building wealth?
Yeah, so Kiyosaki, he gives us a ton of different strategies, but I think one of the most important ones is this idea of, always be learning. Like Rich Dad, he was all about becoming, financially literate, really understanding how money actually works.
So it's not just about like reading one book or taking like a
Mm.
weekend course.
Yeah.
It's more about making, financial education a lifelong thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's about, reading books, going to seminars, listening to podcasts like this one even. Surrounding yourself with people who like are knowledgeable about finance because the more you learn, the more equipped you'll be to actually like see opportunities and make smart decisions.
Right.
Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to money.
Makes sense. But Kiyosaki also goes beyond just like general financial knowledge, right? He talks about mastering formulas, which I got to say, it sounds kind of mysterious to me.
Right. Yeah, I know, right? It's not about like magic formulas or get rich quick schemes or anything like that. It's more about um developing a deep understanding of specific strategies. He gives the example of buying foreclosures, right? Which is like a
Yeah.
strategy that he used to build a lot of wealth. But his point is there are all these different formulas out there.
Hmm.
It's about finding one that, clicks with you, that makes sense to you, learning it really well, mastering it, and then once you've done that, moving on to a new one.
So it's less about like finding the one magic answer and more about having this system for like continuous improvement and growth.
Yeah, exactly. But, even if you have the best strategies in the world, they won't work if you don't have, self-discipline. And this is where one of Kiyosaki's most famous pieces of advice comes in. Pay yourself first.
I have heard that one before.
It sounds pretty basic, right?
Uh-huh.
But he gives it like a whole new meaning because it's not just about, putting money in a savings account. It's about actually prioritizing your asset column. So like most people, what they do is they pay everyone else first, right? They pay their landlord, their credit card companies, they pay the government with taxes. And then, if there's anything left over, maybe they'll save a little bit.
If they're lucky.
Right. But Rich Dad, he says, you got to flip the script. Allocate money to your asset column first, even if it's just a small amount. And then you figure out how to cover your expenses with what's left.
That makes sense in theory, but it's like, when you're actually facing those bills, those expenses, it's hard to have that discipline.
Yeah, and that's where that, remember the Alamo mentality comes in.
Right.
Kiyosaki talks about using that pressure as motivation to like get creative, find solutions, find ways to generate more income.
So instead of letting, that fear kind of paralyze you, you use it to push you forward.
Exactly. He even says that, he would pay himself first, even when he was short on cash, even if it meant, risking making his creditors angry. That commitment to building that asset column, it was more important than like short-term comfort.
Mm.
It's a level of discipline that I think most people just, don't have.
Yeah, that's next level. But it speaks to the level of commitment it actually takes to get to, like real financial freedom.
Uh-huh.
But you can't do it all alone, right? Kiyosaki talks a lot about finding mentors too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He learned from, brokers, accountants, other professionals who had like real expertise in specific areas of finance. And he really emphasizes this idea of building a network of like what he calls smart people.
And being willing to actually pay for their
Oh,
expertise, right? He even says, I think, he actually likes it when his brokers make a lot of money because it means he's probably making a lot of money too.
yeah,
It's like this win-win situation where, you can benefit from their knowledge and they benefit from your success.
Uh-huh, exactly. It's about understanding that investing in, relationships can be just as valuable as investing in like stocks or real estate.
Right.
And this brings us to, I think, one of the most, one of the most intriguing ideas in the book, and probably one of the most controversial, this idea of be an Indian giver.
Yeah, I was wondering when we get to this one. This is a concept that definitely gets people talking. What does he actually mean by that? Because it does sound a little shady, to be honest.
Yeah, I know, right? So he's referring to this, it was a practice in some Native American cultures where they would, give gifts, but then they would ask for them back later. And of course, to like European settlers, this seemed really strange and kind of offensive.
Yeah, I can see how that would lead to some misunderstandings.
Yeah.
But what's the financial lesson here?
So Kiyosaki, what he's saying is that this embodies a really powerful principle of wealth creation, which is like giving in order to receive. He gives these examples of like giving away free condominiums or giving away, shares of stock, but it's all part of a bigger investment strategy.
So it's not about manipulating people or expecting, something specific in return.
It's more about creating this flow of like abundance.
Yeah.
Understanding that, being generous can often lead to unexpected opportunities.
It's about shifting your mindset from scarcity to abundance. And it doesn't have to be, anything super complicated. It could be as simple as, offering to help a colleague with a project or like volunteering your time for a cause you care about or, mentoring someone who's just starting out.
Okay, yeah. I'm starting to see how this Indian giver thing could actually be applied in like a modern way. It's about thinking long term, building those relationships, understanding that like giving can be just as powerful as receiving.
Uh-huh, exactly.
Mhm.
And it actually connects to another key takeaway from the book, which I think is especially important in, today's world, which is like the speed of learning.
Right.
Kiyosaki argues that the ability to like learn quickly is becoming even more valuable than, any specific set of facts or skills.
Makes sense.
Because knowledge is changing all the
Changing,
time,
right?
right? So you got to be able to adapt and keep up. It's almost like knowledge itself has a shelf life now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. He even says that, hard work is like an old formula.
Right.
He calls it a relic of the Stone Age, basically.
Wow.
In today's world, it's not just about working hard, it's about working smart, right? It's about embracing new technologies, being resourceful, and constantly upgrading your skills.
So the takeaway there is if you want to be financially successful, don't just focus on focus on how fast you can learn new things. I
Exactly.
mean, that's great advice in any field, really. But of course, some people might say that like Kiyosaki oversimplifies things or that his advice isn't always, practical for everyone's situation.
Yeah, I can see that. I think it's important to remember that, like, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is really meant to be, like, a starting point. It's not a super detailed financial plan? It's about getting people to think differently, to spark new ideas, to encourage them to take control of their financial future.
And everyone's situation is unique, right? What works for one person might not work for another.
Oh, for sure. It's about, finding what resonates with you, taking action, and then, like, adjusting your approach as you go.
Learning and growing.
Exactly. But there's another layer to Kiyosaki's advice that I think sometimes gets overlooked, and that's the power of corporations.
Oh, yeah, we haven't really touched on that yet. What's so special about corporations? Because most people think of corporations as like big businesses, not really personal finance.
Right. But Kiyosaki's point is that, like, corporations, they're not just businesses, right? They're legal entities that can actually give you some, like, unique advantages when it comes to building wealth and protecting your assets.
Okay. In what way?
Well, he actually, like, goes into the history of taxes and how, wealthy people have been using corporations to like minimize their tax burden for centuries. And he suggests that, forming a corporation, it should be part of everyone's financial strategy.
Even if you're not running like a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah. He sees it as like a powerful tool for anyone who wants to, create financial freedom and protect what they've earned from like lawsuits and creditors and all that.
I mean, that's a pretty provocative idea,
Yeah.
but it does make you think about like all the different ways people can structure their finances to like achieve their goals.
Exactly. And it highlights how important it is to understand like the legal and financial systems that we're all operating in. But, there's even more to Rich Dad, Poor Dad than even what we've talked about today. We've covered a lot, but Kiyosaki has so many, thought-provoking insights and kind of unconventional strategies.
I'm ready for more. Let's keep diving in. All right, so we've gone through a lot of like practical advice from Rich Dad, Poor Dad,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a feeling there's still more to uncover. Kiyosaki, he always has these like unconventional ideas up his sleeve.
Oh, yeah, there are definitely a few more things we need to talk about. One of the, I think, most interesting ones is this idea that the rich invent money, which, it's not about actually like printing your own cash or anything.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
about seeing those opportunities where other people just see like roadblocks.
Okay, so give me an example of this inventing money thing. Like, how does that actually work?
Well, he tells this great story about how he bought this really rundown property for super cheap. And it wasn't even because he wanted to fix it up. It was because he realized that the property came with these like 4 empty lots.
So he wasn't buying a house, he was buying land.
Yeah, pretty much.
So what did he do with it?
He demolished the house, sold the empty lots to like a developer and
Yeah.
made a nice profit. Basically turned like a not so great asset into a money-making opportunity.
Real estate magic.
Right.
Turned a lemon into lemonade.
Exactly. And, that's, I think, a perfect example of what he means by financial intelligence.
Mm.
It's about seeing the potential that other people miss,
Mm.
finding creative solutions, making your money work for you instead of, you working for money.
About being resourceful, right?
Yeah.
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 Kiyosaki also talks about like raising capital
Yeah.
and how a lot of people, they just kind of limit themselves to like traditional bank loans.
Yeah, he says that there are all these other ways to, finance deals, especially when it comes to real estate. Like, he gives an example of putting down a small amount of cash on a property, and then he found someone else to, like, take over his position. So he made a profit without ever actually owning the property.
So it's like he was playing a different game altogether.
Yeah.
Like he was playing financial chess. But that takes a lot of skill, a lot of knowledge.
And yeah, definitely. And that's why he talks so much about having, a team of experts around you, people who can help you analyze deals, manage properties, make good decisions. It's that smart people network again.
So you don't have to be like an expert in everything. You can use other people's knowledge and skills to like boost your own success. That's a good lesson, no matter what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. It's all about like teamwork and collaboration. It's not just about individual effort. One thing that really struck me when I was reading this book was how open Kiyosaki is about his own failures.
Yeah.
He doesn't try to hide his mistakes.
That's refreshing, actually.
Mm.
It makes him seem like more relatable, more human. A lot of those financial gurus, they try to act like they're these perfect experts who never mess up.
Mm.
It can be kind of intimidating.
Totally. And I think Kiyosaki's honesty is part of what makes this book so, like, engaging and authentic.
Yeah.
He's not saying, I have all the answers. He's just sharing his journey, his experiences, the good and the bad, the things he's learned along the way. And I think the main message is, like, don't give up.
He even talks about how his own father, right?
Mhm.
His highly educated poor dad.
Yeah.
He struggled financially, even though he had a good job and worked hard his whole life.
Right. He just never really learned those principles of, like, financial intelligence. He was stuck in that cycle of working for money. He never understood the power of, like, building assets.
It's almost like a cautionary tale, right?
Yeah.
It challenges those ideas we have about what success really is.
Uh-huh.
And it shows us how important it is to develop the right mindset, the right skills, if you want to reach that financial freedom. And there's that question Kiyosaki leaves us with at the end. What do you want to be when you grow up?
All right. And it seems like, a simple question, a question for kids. But I think it's something we should all be thinking about, no matter how old we are.
It's about figuring out what success means to you. All right. What kind of life you actually want to build. What do you want to leave behind?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, Rich Dad Poor Dad is all about getting us to, like, think bigger, to break free from that traditional way of thinking about money and realize that, we can actually create a life of abundance, a life of financial freedom.
That's a powerful message, and it's something that can really resonate with, I think, anyone who's ever dreamed of, like, living a life on their own terms.
Yeah.
Ah.
So I would encourage everyone listening to, like, really ask themselves that question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then use those principles, those ideas from Rich Dad, Poor Dad to start building the life you want.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining me for this this deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's been really eye-opening.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, the journey to financial freedom, it starts with a single step. What will your first step be?